for visual arts and for graphic art and design, and that's for all grade levels. There's a lot of things there for elementary, a lot of things there for middle. And at the end of the session, I think I'll have some time to just to give you a real quick tour of that, but I wanted you to know that it's there. We also have a fabulous team site for ASD West art teachers, again, for all grade levels. And that's a great place to ask questions, to share ideas, to follow through with, to find curriculum documents and things like that. So when I was asked to do a session about technology in the art room, I thought about it for a minute, and I really wondered, do I use technology that much? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that, oh my gosh, it's like in almost everything we do in the art room. And particularly this past year, when students had their own devices and they were able, everybody was kind of on the same playing field that way, that everybody had access to a camera, for example, and everybody had access to image manipulation apps. So we were using it even more this year, and it gave students a real opportunity to bring their own ideas into each of the projects we do. So I'm going to show you some examples of what I mean by that. In past years, when I would be doing projects with, say, my grade 9 visual arts class, we would do some design exploration, and frequently I would have a file of images that I had found that I would lay out on the table, and students could pick from that to find an image to base their designs on, which worked pretty well because they could find something that they thought, okay, this is all right. But this year, my grade 9s all had a device. So instead of pulling out that file of things, I had them find their own image so they could find precisely what they wanted rather than settling for the thing that I had that was closest to something that was interesting for them. The other thing that was really great is it kind of put the control in their hands to do things like find that image. And in this case, I asked them to have their image in at least 3 different sizes. So they had to figure out, how do I download that image? How do I put it into an app where I can adjust the sizes? And what I found was I could suggest apps to them, but they tended to go back to what they knew really well, which I thought was really smart. So most of them did their size manipulation in PowerPoint. They would put their image in PowerPoint, and then they would repeat it, copy it, duplicate it, and then on a PowerPoint screen or PowerPoint page, they would have 3 or 4 different sizes of their image, and they'd print from there. So they went back to things that they were really comfortable with, that they knew, but they worked completely well for this design project. And you can see that in these 2 examples, they're quite different what they've done. And what the students are doing in this project is they're combining, they have a list of the elements of art, they have a list of the principles of design, and they're combining those 2 things in each block to create an interesting design. I do a similar project with my grade 11 class, my graphic art and design class, only it's a little bit more involved. And they, instead of doing 3 blocks, they do 9 blocks, and they have more elements and more principles that they're meant to combine into it. But I found the same thing with them. Instead of me providing them with a bunch of things to choose from, they could get right to something that was very interesting to them. I would not have thought to print out, silhouettes of Bart Simpson, but there were a couple of Simpson fans in the room, and that was the image they wanted to work with. And they wanted, the other student wanted this particular kind of butterfly. And then they could use that to create their combinations. So that was kind of interesting. It gave them a chance to kind of choose their own ideas. But what got really interesting is we had been doing these projects mostly as hands-on drawing, like trace the image onto your page and then figure out how you're going to manipulate it that way. And some of the students who are already pretty tech savvy decided that they wanted to actually do the whole design with their device using either apps that they were familiar with, or the last couple of years, EECD has provided all students taking graphic art and design with a license for Photoshop, Adobe Creative Cloud, so all of the Adobe programs. So some of them had that installed on their own device and were able to explore it. But even without that, there are free apps that kind of mimic what Photoshop will do. So there's one app called GNU Image Manipulation Program, aka GIMP, and it is kind of a shareware, a free version of Photoshop. So, but students would use the program that they felt really comfortable with. So we had some drawing tablets in the room, which we were able to plug into their devices, and they were able to design their own original illustrations and create the whole design digitally, which got very, very cool. And what we found, what I find is really great when things like this happen is we don't have to have assignments that are tech assignments or hands-on assignments. They're just assignments, and students get to choose the tools that work for them to get that assignment done. So the students who really love to paint were happy, they were set up their desks with paints, and sitting next to them would be a student doing digital design. And they're both going to hitting the same curriculum outcomes. They're both satisfying all of the requirements of the assignment, but such different approaches to it. And it's wonderful to see them being able to choose things that they're really comfortable with. Now, that said, all of my students had to do some photo manipulation. So the other thing that made it really nice that they all had this on their own apps is they could choose, they could either take their own photos, because now they all have a camera in their phone or on their iPad, or even in their laptop, they could take a photo with that. So they could have personal photos. One of the assignments I gave them, one of the assignment option was to adapt a family photograph. So the picture on the left is the student's parents, so and the family dog. So she's combined them together. And the picture on the right, the option for that was to create an image that would be used either in an online article or a magazine spread on a person from pop culture that you're really interested in. And I'm sorry to say I cannot name this person in the picture. The student told me at the time, but I think their pop culture interest and mine, there's just such a big gap there that I missed the name of this guy. And if anybody knows, you can write that in the chat. But it's really a beautiful photo manipulation and would work really great for that kind of spread. Past years, I've done typography with students, which is creating an image using letters. And I've done it using either hand-drawn images or collage with magazine text, where they cut them out and collage it together. But now, again, having apps on their own devices, more of them were choosing to do it in a digital format. And one of the great things about some of these apps that are available, like Photoshop or like GNU, is that you can work in layers. So what I showed them was a method where they could find an image that they liked, like the photo of the eagle. They could put it into their app. They could create new layers to put the text on top of that. And then they could eliminate that original layer. So it gives them something really structured to build on. And therefore, they have a path. They know where they're going. And the results are much more satisfying, much more convincing as an image of something. Whereas if they're just trying to move the letters around, then they tend to make just happy faces or something like that. So it really opened the door for them to try images that were far more sophisticated. And it wasn't hard to do this. It required real patience and perseverance, which, frankly, are two qualities we certainly want our students to work on. So here are some of the images. The first one that I showed you, that was just a sample I made specifically for this presentation, so I hadn't finished it. But here are some of the images that the students did. And I think, I know I'm biased, but I think they're pretty impressive what they came up with. And some of them found, whole other ways to do it. So the last one I showed you, she's working mostly with the outlines, doing it as sort of a linear image, whereas the student decided to take words and fill the image with it. But again, he was working on a photograph first and building the text layers on top. and chose words to work with that he thought fit this one. And then others find a whole other ways to do it. So it's you can show them a couple of different possibilities. But what I have found is really interesting is the students will explore that and they'll come up with ideas that I hadn't thought of, and then those ideas become the exemplars for students who come after them. And I always say that each group of students kind of stands on the shoulders of the students before them. That it's the students who have really built this program up and have really shown each other how they can keep trying things that are more and more interesting, more and more complex. We do a similar thing in a much more complicated kind of layout. I asked them as one of their options, they can create a magazine cover. And some of them asked me, can I just invent my own magazine? And I discourage that. And the reason for it is because I really want them to study what part of this is to study how magazines are constructed. And magazine covers are far more complex than they first think when they look at them. They think, well, you know what, it's the name of the magazine, it's a few headlines, it's a picture, that's it. But once they start building it based on an actual existing magazine like Guitar World or Fitness, they realize that they are very, very complex things and that layout is a complex thing. So we start this project the same way that we do the typography with the eagle example. They find a copy of the magazine that they like, they put it into their image manipulation program, whether it's Photoshop or GNU, and then they build their layers on top of it. So all of this is built. They find the fonts, they match the fonts, they match the layout, they match the colors, they match the alignment, and so on. And what I found it gets them to do is really notice things, like all the things that you want them to notice when they're looking at design and trying to analyze design. Things like font style, things like font size and font weight, kerning, which is something they didn't know existed, but that's the spacing between the letters. And some magazines have really tight kerning where the letters are touching each other, and some have a really loose kerning where the letters are really far apart. So they start to observe that and how the designers are kind of creating these different effects with that. They notice things like alignment, whether they're right or left, whether they're all the same alignment on a magazine cover. They notice something called leading, which is the space between the lines of type. And on something like a magazine cover or a poster or a CD cover, oftentimes the leading, the space between lines is compressed. And again, they wouldn't have noticed that unless they tried to line their own text up on top of it. And by the way, when they're putting their own text in, they're not copying the headlines that are there. They're writing their own headlines, but they're using the layout of the existing magazine for how to do the spacing. They notice colors and how many colors are used, repetition of things. So they become incredibly observant when they're building on that. And they get amazing results when they create their own magazine cover. They also notice the style of the photograph. That, you know, whether it's going to be, you know, a moody, wispy photograph or more of an engaging, darker image. And again, because they can pursue all this on their own, they get to choose something that is in their wheel well, something that is a style, something that is a theme that interests them specifically. So that is really fun to see. Here are a couple more of the examples of what students have done. And then again, getting back to the students who do things like want to do their own digital design. Some of the students are really keen to do that. Those are the magazines that interest them. So they can go that extra step and they can create, instead of doing a photo shoot, they do their own digital design for it. And that is really amazing. And some of the students who have done these kinds of things have gone on to study design after that. Not all, but some. We do all kinds of different digital design. where we'll give them a theme like emphasis, which one of our principles of design. And some students, again, will do it as a drawing or a painting, but a lot of students want to tackle that as a digital design. And in these programs, there's lots of shapes and filters and colors and textures they can use for that, so they can create some pretty interesting designs that way. And another project I do with the graphic design students is a project about color schemes. Many of the students, again, prefer to do hands-on, want to create pastel drawings or want to create paintings or little sculptures, but students who want to pursue digital design can do that. So we've had some really, really interesting results in that. The task for this assignment is to create a presentation using 6 different color schemes and making all 6 work together as a unified presentation. So these ones were digital design again, and the student designed a little handmade book for them to go in. And the little digital tie-dye t-shirts. I had students do actual tie-dye t-shirts as well, so it was kind of fun to see like the digital version and the tactile version. And they can explore all kinds of things using these programs. So this is a digital design for repetition, where they were able to figure out all kinds of different ways to use filters and then to repeat what they had done. So this is repetition of a repetition, actually, in this particular design. Or what I find really fun is when you combine old ideas and new ideas. So this is digital design, but based on quilt blocks. So I had quilt block patterns. Students would take their own original photograph, print it out however many times they needed to create their image. So in the case of this one, it's 3/6, and then use the quilt block pattern to physically cut those out and assemble them on a construction paper background. Individually, they look really, really great, but as a class set, they are amazing because it's like this one giant crazy quilt. So if you're looking for a project where students can work individually, but then come together to collaborate to make a bigger display, this is really a great one. And this one, I did this with my visual arts 11, or sorry, my graphic art 11 class. But you could do this with middle school students very easily, and it gives them a chance to look at something from their culture that maybe their mothers or fathers. My father was a quilter, actually. Their grandparents might be quilters, and bring something modern to it. So students have done ad campaigns and logo designs. Really, there's no limit to what they can do. One of the great things about these programs is you can tell them these are the programs that people in industry are using. So if somebody is doing magazine covers or posters or CD covers, they are using the same programs. So that's with my design students, but I also use technology a lot in my visual arts projects, my visual arts classes. My husband laughed when he saw this slide included in this slideshow, because really this particular device, it's a book press that I use for block printing, and it is a piece of technology that dates back to 1640. So it's really funny to combine that with contemporary digital technology, but it works. So the book press is what we use to make the actual prints. But to come up with the imagery for the prints, we start with digital design. And I allow students to, pardon me, to choose an image that they really connect with. And it's usually somebody from pop culture. And then we'll use filters that are available in any of these image manipulations. So in Photoshop, it's a stamp filter. But I looked at GIMP, and there are similar filters in there as well. And it creates a really high contrast image. So they get to really see how the image translates into high contrast. And then they can transfer that to their block, carve it, print it. And what I love about this is it gets all the students to the point where they're really focused on the skill that I want them to learn, which is that process of carving the block and printing the block and exploring what happens in printmaking. And they get there with an image that they're excited about. So it speeds up that front part instead of them hand drawing an image. Plus, it almost guarantees success with this project because they've gotten to choose the person. They are working from a really clear, clean image, and they're going to get a really neat result. So what I found happens once you do that, once they have the image, then they can kind of free themselves up to explore that, back to 1640 or 1640 press, how to ink them in different ways and how to layer those prints and how to combine them to get this really interesting repeated design. So it was the students who came up with this, printing it in one color and then re-inking the block in a different color and printing it right on top, slightly off. So it's just using one block, but getting a 2-color print. And they came up with ways to mix the colors, come up with methods of putting the images together, and even doing things like collaging their paper before they print or printing on something that's not our typical print paper. So in this case, this is Reggie from Riverdale printed on Archie comic book pages, which I thought was really clever. I've had students do self-portraits where they start with digital design. So these are acrylic paintings, but they start by doing a selfie and then putting a filter on their selfie called cutout filter. And again, that's the Photoshop name, but it is available in the shareware as well. And they can then play with the color settings and get an image that they think is going to be fun to paint. It breaks it down into these color fields, I guess, kind of akin to a paint by number, but they're tasked with having to translate this image, which is now a printed digital image, to their canvas and paint it. So I had a teacher show me this little device once. This is certainly not high tech, but it's a piece of technology that allows us to go from the digital design to the painting really easily. And it's just a template that I make. I make 3 or 4 of these. The interior part of it in here is divided in 1-inch squares, and the exterior part is divided into 2-inch squares. So the interior part is exactly the size of their photo. I get them to print it out so it's exactly 6 by 8, and they can crop it to 6 by 8 inches and print it that way. And the canvas that I gave them was twice that's like 12 by 16. So instead of them measuring grids on their photos and measuring grids on their canvas, they just can put this template down, make a little tick mark every place they see a line, and then connect the ticks. And instead of spending 2 days gridding a photo and gridding a canvas, they spend about 15 minutes. And it's a wonderful way to speed up that part of the process. And the lovely thing about this is it's really easy to get great results regardless of your painting and drawing skills. So once they've figured out how to grid it and transfer the information, the students, when they're designing their images, if they're more ambitious, they can make it more detailed and more layers. But the students who aren't as confident and don't feel that their skills are as tight can still get really realistic results and be really, really happy with what they've made. And all together, they look amazing as a group. Here's some of the ones that my students pulled off a couple of years ago. Good fun. And then let's see, I'm just checking my time, make sure I'm not, okay, we're good. Also just using the technology to do photography and connecting photography with our study of art. So if you're looking at the history of art and you want to do it using their apps, for one thing, they can use their app to research some art history. I do really direct my students as far as that goes, as far as where they look for images, because if I ask them to find a piece of art from a famous piece from art history, they have no idea what that is. So if they just put in paintings, they're going to see all kinds of things from, amateur paintings to copies of things to original work to art historically significant work, and they can't filter between it. So I usually send them to a site like Google Arts and Culture, because I know the things on that site, they've been vetted. They're there because they've been curated. Have them choose an artwork and reproduce it as a photograph, which is a really neat project to do. And I noticed that during the early part of COVID lockdown, a lot of people were doing this at home, and it just was great fun, entertaining to watch people trying to create these art historical images using with what they had around the house. But what it gets my students to do is to really examine those things about art history that you really want them to notice. They start to notice composition, they notice color, they notice lighting, they notice what's emphasized, they notice angles, and they really have to work to match that. There are also some really cool apps out there, like on Google Arts and Culture. They can take a selfie, put it into an app that's on that site, and it will suggest paintings that they look like. And so they can choose paintings that way as well. Or if they don't want to be the center of attention in a photograph, they can choose another kind of painting, like this sweet little dog painting. Or they can do a parody. And I have to say, I always tell the students to tell me what image they're doing before they begin. And when Jean-Luc told me he wanted to do the creation of Adam, I was scared. But he assured me it would be fine. and he did it as a parody of him repairing his car and his sister passing him the tools. So I thought it was quite a funny twist on it. And we used apps, particularly this past year, we used their own devices for a lot of responding to art activities. I have done responding to art calendar, 30 days of art. And the great thing about this is each day has a different artwork or a different artist for the students to explore. But in the end, I didn't have them do them in order, and I didn't have them do all 30. I allowed them to choose, one from a Monday post and one from a Tuesday post. So they could, again, have more input into the art that kind of caught their attention, which art did they want to look at. And they could do it independently really easily because they have the links to either the video or the article or the website, and the questions were all there, and they could explore that on their own. Right, so just pointing out some of the free things that are available, because as I said, Photoshop was available these past couple of years. It's a super expensive program though. So I really try to encourage students to explore programs that they can get for free to install on their own devices. And you can install them on school devices as well. So GNU Image Manipulation Program, or GIMP, is the one that is a Photoshop variation. Snapseed is a great one for photo editing. It has all kinds of cool filters. So if they wanted to have like a 1950s vibe to a photograph, they could add a filter for that. Dafont.com is one of my favorite websites because it is filled with fonts, and they are free to use. Some of them are free to use regardless, but almost all of them are free to use if it's just for personal use. And for your students, that would be the case. And you can find a broad range of fonts. So if you want to find the actual font they use on Rolling Stone magazine, you can find it there. But if you also want to find wingding fonts, so if you wanted a number of different images of trees or of old technology, like tape recorders or TVs, you can find those. And so my students in design use that a lot. Google Arts and Culture, I mentioned to you, it is a wonderful site that links to thousands of museums and has ultra high quality images, and they are cross-referenced in a number of different ways. It has all kinds of games and activities on it as well, and some apps that you can download, like taking a photo of something and putting a Van Gogh filter on it. And then Portrait AI is an app that somebody had recommended to me, and you probably all have seen apps where you can do a photo and it will turn it into more of a cartoon style drawing, but Portrait AI turns it into sort of a 19th century painting, which is kind of fun to see yourself as a 19th century painting. So those are some of the fun free stuff that's out there. And I will show you a little bit of the SharePoint site, but first I'm just going to see if anybody has any questions, or Matt, is there anything that I should be noting in the chat?
Nothing in the chat, but yeah, I have a question actually, Susan. I'm just wondering with just a few of the different options that you're giving students. Let's say one student chooses Photoshop and another student chooses GIMP, and so on. Is that difficult for you as a teacher to try to keep those things straight because it's called one thing on GIMP and another name on Photoshop? How tough is that as a teacher?
You know, it's not really that tough because we had Photoshop available. Photoshop was the one that I recommended. So I was using, you know, the language of Photoshop. The students who decided to choose other apps generally chose them because they were really familiar with them. And so I didn't have to bridge that so much. Really, I probably learned as much from them about those apps as they would learn from me. So that wasn't a big deal. If I was just using GIMP, I would go in and really familiarize myself. So if Photoshop isn't available this coming year, for example, I'd spend, you know, some time with GIMP. But what's really great is it's so easy just to Google that, like, does GIMP have an equivalent of a cutout filter from Photoshop? And it will tell you what it is. So it's super easy.
Good point, good strategy, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna really quickly show you the SharePoint site, and then we'll wrap up here. So the SharePoint site is a site that I have built with lots of stuff on it for different grade levels. So when you go to the home page, you'll see it there. There's links for different elementary grade levels, middle and high school grade levels, different courses. There's also links for all of our curriculum documents are here. So if you have a hard time tracking down curriculum documents for a particular grade level, they are all here and they're all on one page together. Some online resources, which is an ever-growing site. There's not a ton of links there because I don't want to make it overwhelming, but things that I use often are there. There are some responding to art activities as cross-referencing its own page. It also has the link to our team site right from there. And on every page for every grade level, there is a little image gallery showing some things that have been happening in ASD West in classrooms. And we'll just go to grade 11, 12. So each page will have, each of these would be a link to a lesson on a particular subject. So you can click on these and have lessons and exemplars there. Choice board we've designed for grade 11 and 12, different sketchbook ideas. And then I cross-reference the curriculum guides for each grade level are also on that grade page. So should be quite easy to find. And I'm in the process of uploading this just now. There are tons of images that are great exemplars for the Visual Arts 11 curriculum guide. And so they are set up by curriculum outcomes. So, and they're just set up as little galleries of images. So if you're looking for ideas and you think better visually, which is kind of like me, you can go there and just flip through some ideas and see what other grade 11 students have been doing, what other grade 11 teachers have been doing. Let's just take that back home here. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen if I can here. Get back to this, that, and down there. Here. There we go. Got it. So, whoops. Okay, so am I back? I'm not sharing now, right?
You're good.
Good. Okay. So I think that pretty much wraps up my end of it, unless anybody has questions or any comments. I think we're good. Great. Thanks, Beth. It's Beth Crawford. Thank you for that comment. That's great.
Can I just say that we're so excited you're coming back as the Fine Arts lead this year, and I know that your abilities to work in crisscross curricular ways make you very popular. So I will say to those who are on right now, if you would like to collaborate or co-conspire, as I put it, with Susan this year, send me an email because her schedule always fills up very quickly. But if you have a nugget of an idea and you're looking for some boots on the ground to help you kind of do that early lifting to get it off the ground, then just send an email, and we're so happy to be welcoming you back to the team, Susan. You're a real asset to the district.
I'm over the moon excited to be coming back, and I really cannot wait to be collaborating with teachers again. That will be wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And I will also mention the SharePoint site that I showed. If you haven't already accessed that, you can send an email to either Beth or me, and we will give you access to that, because I think you do need access. Am I correct? Yeah. So yeah, just fire off an email to Beth or me, and we will definitely give you access. Okay. Any other questions or comments? And as I mentioned at the beginning, that I'm broadcasting from Toronto today because I'm here visiting my brother for the first time in 2 years, and I saw my son for the first time in 14 months. So I'm in this. I'm not in my usual office space. it's a fun little room, but I've never broadcast about art surrounded by basketball memorabilia before. So this is like a good first one for me.
That's great. Susan, this was really fun for me to watch, just all the amazing ideas that you have and how your students are embracing them and creating such beautiful pieces of art, and to have that all captured as a resource on the SharePoint site too is fantastic. Do some of these teachers and all teachers in our district have an opportunity to share on that site as well?
The SharePoint site, if they send things to me, I can put things on the SharePoint site. The team site, they can upload directly.
Mm-hmm.
They have access to that. Yes. So
right,
we have,
and yeah, sorry to cut you off there, but the team site is more of that collaborative space too. Here I have an idea, or I'm showcasing what my students have done, and it's more of a breathing site, whereas the SharePoint's more of a showcase site.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I know it's tough to present to just avatars sometimes, but this was excellent.
Oh, it was great. You're a great audience. I appreciate it.
Oh, great. Well, this session's recorded. If you want to come back, and we'll be sending those links out to all the recordings from today's LearnEast. And this is a great way to kick it off. Thanks for recharging our batteries here, Susan, and thanks to everyone for coming and joining and listening and participating.
Yeah, good luck this year, everybody. And you know, it's going to be fun to be back in our classrooms again and see our people. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Enjoy.
Great. Thanks, guys.